Hi and welcome to Spiritual Link, the podcast. A podcast about how developing spiritual well-being can help you in your daily life and how that can enhance your confidence in who you are and what you are. The podcast is hosted by Ines and Tor. Ines is a development medium with over 30 years of experience in the field, and Tor has been her apprentice since 2013. On the podcast, we are going to cover a broad range of topics such as meditation, chakras, intuitions, and crystals, only to mention a few. In this episode, we are going to introduce ourselves, why we think it is important that people learn about these practices now, and we start to cover the practice of visual meditation. You can support us by sharing the episode on your social media channels, subscribing to our podcast, and leaving a review. Remember, you can always find us on @SpiritualLinkCo on Instagram for questions and comments for future episodes. So Ines, how did you get into the spiritual field in the first place? Like, what happened? How long?
Well, in my case, at least, I was on the verge of going through a divorce. And everything. I had two young children, and then the house was going to be divided. Also, having moved to England, I didn't have the social network. So, in other words, I was sort of alone, and I was going through a crisis. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, you must see a man who is deceased now, called Owen Potts." I never thought that anybody could actually help me, because it's a personal situation, and a lot of people go through divorces on the same predicament as I am. Anyway, I saw the man, and because I was already going through a divorce, I knew I was sort of free, and I liked the looks of the man. I liked the way he presented himself. He was a clairvoyant, trance medium, and so on and so forth. And he gave me a reading, which, fine, it didn't solve any problems. It didn't make me feel any better. I just enjoyed being with a man with a personality. And I went there several times. And then one time I went, he said, "Well, would you like to come to one of my seminars?" Which was just on the topic, I didn't even know what clairvoyance was. I think it was on regression. That meant, it meant going back in time. So anyway, I went. And from there on, he was also going through a divorce. From there on, we became interested in one another. And I started literally, let us say, being taught by him, or opening up. It's not really a teaching. All you're doing is opening up the channels of understanding, which we all have. And so gradually I came into that after the divorce. Then Owen and I started working together. We did seminars, and I was under the guidance of guides. Well, during the period of time that I went through the, through the teachings of spiritual guides, from astral projections to regression, where I found out where I was born before, or what I was before, it all started making sense, where I had been born this lifetime, and then where we eventually immigrated to, and what relevance it had, which also brought to mind the interactions in this lifetime that I have with various individuals, meaning that the divorce, which is never nice, but I didn't leave with hatred or a sense of lack of respect for myself or anything like that. I understood that it was time to move on for whatever reason, and how an individual then reacts, of course, to any given situation is then the learning process, and gives us strength, as you said yourself. But from that, I became a transfiguration medium, and also a development medium. Owen Potts was clairvoyant, transfiguration, trance. He had everything. But in the end, you concentrate on one area, of course, as well. You cannot do everything either. But through that, of course, the wonderful people that I've met, and individuals through the groups that have been coming through my through my hands, if you like, for so long. We have been together in biblical times. We have been together in Roman times. At one time, I was a guide, which is sort of, I suppose, the angel, if you like, and they were all people at that time of like-minded. Some were cleaners, some were in charge of a library in Rome. All of these people had a common denominator of thought and belief structure, which was outside of the norm at that particular time. And then what they channeled was myself, which is, again, it doesn't mean anything. What it does mean, we don't lose anyone. We're always together. We're all learning. So next time somebody else is in that predicament, helping us along the way of life. So this totalness of life was it's just of completeness. There's more than just, say, going to work, which we have to pay the bill, but there's so much more. And our life might be boring, but it's not boring. There's a reason for everything that happens. And that, I think, is a wonderful, let us say, gift if we are able to channel and to find that within ourselves. Everybody has the ability to do that, and that I'm hoping very much through our the spiritual link that we're trying to bring forward, that through what we talk about gives that person who is listening, say, the freedom of thought, to mull it over, to grab hold of something, to question, to deny, to accept, whatever it is, gives you the freedom of who you are, to explore who you are, and gives strength to the reason you were born where you were, and also your personality. And I think from that, it very, very briefly said, yes, something had to push me into this direction. It was an adverse situation. I was being kicked out of my nest. Not good. And then you find another nest. You have to. You sink or swim. And I think this is what, let's just say, spiritual well-being or spiritual development, looking into yourself, is a word, isn't it? Can actually help us. Basically, that's how I got into it. But the bottom line of that, it also gave me a sense of peace, say, my own life, the lifestyle, the karmic pattern, that there's other things, that there's a learning process and so on. That's basically, very, very, very basically how I got into it. Of course, you, Thor, I understand that you've had a far more exciting and stable background on which to fall, haven't you?
Well, I suppose in this respect, so I was introduced to the spiritual field, I suppose, very early on. Actually, I think I was sort of consciously introduced to the topic when I was like 7 or 8 by my grandmother.
Yes.
Right. So I was very young at the time. And my grandmother is a medium in many ways, to like Owen Potts is a medium as well. And I don't know if I imagined this, but I remember being very young, and there was also always like crystals around. And there was one time where my grandmother, I suppose, sort of sat in like a trance. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, I suppose when you're children, you're much more open, and that it was almost like she just like vanished. Mm-hmm. And someone else came in and take over. And I mean, when you're young, maybe some people find that very frightening and very sort of scary, but at the time I wasn't. And obviously it was also my grandmother, which then in turn will make it feel safe and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think that was the time where I was introduced to that way of experiencing spirituality, of understanding that there are more which exists beyond like what we can touch and what we can feel. Like there's more that we can see and experience with our inner eye, right? And when I was, and I wasn't like, she wasn't pushing it a lot whilst I was growing up. We were sort of just, every time I visited her every summer, and we talked about these topics, and we talked about life and death and crystals and guides. And I suppose in so many ways, I think what it did for me very early on is that it did open a door in my mind to have the strength to go through some quite difficult situations. Also, when I was like 7 or 8, my household burned down, right? My parents were going through a divorce. I was being bullied at school. And I think that by my grandmother introducing me to this very early on, it gave me a sense of resilience and a sense of calm, and like the ability to persevere and cope with those experiences. Obviously, when I was adolescent, all of that slightly went out the window, and partying was much more fun. But then, in 2012, 13, I met you. Again,
Mm,
like it was really interesting because at the time I was probably also going through an experience where my, let's say, mental health had taken a turn for the worse, I would say. And I was visiting my grandmother over Christmas. And she sort of, as grandmothers do, they sort of lean in, and she said, like, what is going on with you? Like, what is happening in your life right now? She probably knew exactly what was going on, but didn't really want to say it because she was my grandmother. But then she said, Tor, you need to find a group. Like right now, you need to find a group that does the practices that we do, like the psychicness and the opening of the mind and seeing the world in a different way. So I did, and I mean, I think I met her. I met her over Christmas, and then 2 months later, like even a month later, I think I was in your group.
mm-hmm.
Starting to develop my own sense of like psychicness. And I mean, I've been working with you for what, 7 years now, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that again, by practicing, it has given me a sense of calmness and a stillness, and but also like a different sense of perspective, right? And it's given me really helpful practices to do every day, to like let go of the heaviness, to let go of the negativity, because there's so much in that in the world. And that's not to say that we should always be overly positive, but I do think it's a good thing to look at those things which are good in our life and spend some time healing those things which are perhaps negative or perhaps heavy, because I think it just makes us more wholesome human beings. There's a saying, says I mean, a huge part of our practice is meditation. And some people talk about meditation as like an internal shower, like you wash out all the grit, and if you don't do it, you kind of stink. I mean, obviously
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
very
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's definitely what many of the spiritual well-being practices that we do on a daily basis, that's been incredibly helpful on the podcast. For
Yes.
people who are listening, like
Yes.
what are the different topics in time that you and I think will be covering?
Well, I'm hoping that I mentioned regression, astral projection, astral projection, aura readings, and so on, psychometry, flower clairsendience. We talk about chakrams, colors, and so on and so forth. What we're also hoping very much is that those individuals that are listening also bring forward topics and questions that we can turn over and perhaps bring forward a perspective on what it means. There are many wonderful books, and everyone will have their own take. We're very much hoping that we can give a very non-biased explanation, whereby if you have a different set of religious or spiritual rules to go by, that you're still able to incorporate what you hear from us in accordance to your own needs and wishes or requirements. So
Mm.
anything, I mean, it's endless, absolutely endless.
I mean,
Life
that's a,
after death, what is the difference between a guide, an angel, all of those things? Does it matter if you clean your crystals in moonlight or in hot water, or up your bra? All of those things.
that sounds beautifully exciting to me. So, for someone who's just okay, so someone has just tuned into our podcast
Yeah.
and they are curious,
Yes.
they are open. What is the if someone was a complete beginner,
Yes.
where would what if they could start doing something different
Yes.
every
Okay.
day? What do we think they could do?
Relaxation, meditation, without the calming of the mind, nothing else you can't do astral projection, you can't do anything. You can't work with crystals, you still have to have, that is the beginning and the end.
Spiritual well-being and spiritual wellness and spiritual development has existed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it more important than ever that we open these doors in our mind, looking into the future, right? We're going through coronavirus pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We are experiencing
Global warming.
global warming, climate change is looming. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of sort of big issues around the world which are looming. And
Yes.
I do think that I do think that a lot of people are looking.
Looking.
They are looking, but
Absolutely.
why?
I think the obvious things that you've mentioned, of course, but and if we pick that to pieces, it's the individual difficulties that everyone is going through. It doesn't always mean that you're starving or you have no roof over the head, although I believe about 70% of the population of the world do not have enough to eat, do not have any place secure to live. In some places, you're just the next accident away from bankruptcy, even though you've been prudent and working very hard. So I think the peace of mind through meditation is there for self-preservation to help. Let us say it's a preventative against illness. It is not a cure, or that we will not get ill, but it is a preventative. Most of the, or at least a lot of the illnesses, modern illnesses as such, are from stress. You cannot work long enough because someone else will take your place. You have to take 0 hours and still not pay the rent. All of those things play havoc on our heart, our lungs, the nervous system, and so we get some very, very bad illnesses. How long any system, say a national health system on the globe can manage in the future, no one knows. So what we're doing is like brushing our teeth, hoping that gum disease will not take hold. But that is what meditation is. It is a preventative. It helps us to relax. It helps to bring our life into some form of perspective, that we are able to deal perhaps a little bit better with the onslaught of this huge commercialism of the world is not enough was a film. There's not enough consumerism. We're now, with this coronavirus, we're supposed to all of a sudden have, retail therapy. Maybe we have money, maybe we don't have any money, but even if you do, where do you go? There's no place to go anymore. And I don't think it'll ever come back, but it will give us peace of mind. That yes, it's nice to look after ourselves, it's nice to have nice clothes and this or that. It's not supposed to take away that motivation, but there is more. And the more is us as individuals. And that can be found through meditation. If there's no meditation, relaxation, calming of the mind, nothing else can fall into line. Even finding the next job. What do I do with my life? Relax. Maybe something will come to mind. Maybe there's an answer. And
Yes,
it all comes through the mind.
Yes, I think an interesting word that you used briefly before we started recording this is the word contaminated, right?
Yeah.
So many of the news cycles and stress and anxiety and so on and so forth that exists within us actually contaminate.
They do. They just stick with us. They go through our mind. Or if someone was rude, or the boss says, "Oh, you're no good for nothing," or "Oh God, how long you've been here, still don't know it." It's it's unfair. It's untrue, but it sticks. That is contamination. So if we're able to find somehow to release that contamination, they've won or you win. And the essence, the trick is you win. You're in control of your thoughts. It wasn't right. And you move on. You try to move on. And that moving on maybe prompts you into another area of work, or that you can get another job, or whatever it happens to be. A clear mind is a thinking mind. And that clear mind is not contaminated with rubbish that other people have thrown at us, or the horrific news. I have seldom seen something happy on the news.
Yeah.
It doesn't sell, does it? It doesn't sell.
Yeah, it doesn't sell. It doesn't sell very well. So, okay, so meditation seems to be like the starting point.
The beginning and the end.
Yeah, you and I meditate every day.
Every day. And the interesting thing, which might be really interesting to you, all of those that are listening or following us, is how Thor promotes his meditation. What I do for meditation at this time, it will change, but it might give you hope that you don't have to sit cross-legged, you don't have to view your hands. It doesn't require anything. If you're unlucky enough to be behind garbage cans, sit there. It's your space. The dustbins don't make anything more special. Green fields don't make it more special. If you're lucky enough or unlucky enough not to have them, your mind is special. Even if you're sharing with 20 other people, you still create your own space.
Yeah. It's sort of cringeworthy, but it's like your body is your temple, right?
It is your temple.
Yeah.
And it begins not only with a good diet. Is easy enough to say if you have the money, the places to cook or to wash, things like that. But it is also to relax the mind.
So the meditation that both you and I practice, right,
Yes,
is
yes,
a visual kind of meditation.
yes,
It's a
yes,
visual meditation.
yes.
What is it? Like, how is it different? Like, what is visual meditation?
Well, there are many different forms of meditation. You can have it from songs or gongs, monotonous and ping, and your mind goes. The reason I was given that visualization is so very powerful is it gives the physical mind something to hold on to. You know you are asked to cross a brook. You can imagine a brook of water. You can imagine a flower. You can imagine that. But also it opens the doorways to literally exploring other realms. Other realms such as what is around you, who is around you. And visualization doesn't hamper you. It doesn't close the door. If you go to just relaxation and then you're no place, amazing. But then what do? Eventually you will progress beyond nothing is there anymore. Whereas in the visualization, you will also reach a point, as we will show you, where there's nothing there. You're relaxed, you're cool, you're calm, relaxed. But then you want to explore a bit more. Then we can push the boundaries out because your mind has already been trained. You have trained the mind to reach out. And that reaching out also is able to bring back answers to ourselves as well.
Okay, so what are we reaching out to? Because that sounds...
What we are reaching out to is that which is around us. Some people call it guidance or so on, and so forth. Other people need to call it angels and so on. What we're trying to do is we're trying to Thor and I are trying to keep to the facts as much as possible, although there's absolutely no way any of this can obviously be proven.
So when you say that we can receive messages, which you know, you and I know very well that we can do in our own experience, we have evidence for these messages to be true.
Yes.
So what is it that people can get messages about?
Well, if we just go back to basics such as surviving, very often most people have had some sort of, my gut reaction made me do this. And gut reaction is literally a form of guidance. It's not a trumpet whispering in your ear, or you see the flashing lights of stardom. It's a gut reaction that makes you react in a certain way. And this gut reaction, it can be a feeling, it could be tingling, it being coldness, all manner of situations are able to come through when we are able to calm the mind. And this calming of the mind can be done when you're in a room full of, let's say you're at a conference, yap, everyone's trying to impress somebody else. But we are able to step back, eyes open, you're still also joining in on the conversation, but your mind is released. And that's when you get the gut reaction of, oh yeah, I should maybe go there, or maybe I should start that conversation. It's not something that you consciously bring forward, but because of the ability to relax and step back, you automatically get that. It becomes part of your life, like brushing your teeth. Then all of that happens. And then when you have so much free time, as we all do, and you actually make time to meditate or calm your mind, then it's a different scenario. That's when you're actually doing your body and your mind a favor. And you're doing our body is a vehicle. It's like fast food. Here today, gone tomorrow. It's like a disposable bag. And what happens to us afterwards? And that connection with ourselves, with our spiritual self is the auric field, it's an electrical force field. We can connect with that. Just pat yourself on the back. Yeah, I survived another day. Yeah, that is...
So I suppose that the messages that one can receive when stepping into meditation is messages about your life, right? How to live your life and make more... Is it like making sense of your life in a spiritual way?
Yeah, I think that's a very nice way of putting it as well. Yes. Some very, I think where caution should always be is the fact that we do not necessarily know about life and death. If we knew that we were going to die in 20 years, 5 days, and 30 minutes, maybe you would not put aside enough money for your pension. Maybe you would spend it because you want to go around that round world trip. Nobody totally knows. They really do not. If you take someone who's been in the morgue and these cases are reported, all of a sudden they're declared dead. Also, there's a knocking on the door. Something has happened and they're back. So always to try to live your life to the fullest for every day.
Thank you for listening to our first episode of Spiritual Link, the podcast. We hope that was insightful and that you could take away some learnings from that. If you have any questions or comments for future episodes, please send them to us on our Instagram at Spiritual Link Co. Next time, we are going to be delving even deeper into the practice of meditation.